Me, I've got too much to read to be worrying about doing rereads anytime soon. Also me, yeah, I'd totally reread that right now. Hey, what's up, bookworms? Mike back today. Talk rereads again. Now, I talked recently about the good and the bad of a reread, where there's no real definitive answer. It kind of depends on what works for your life, right? And I encourage you to do what works for your life. But this is something that I feel like generated enough discussion where I say, look, there are several series that I have reread, and there are some that I would reread again. So today I thought I'd take a look at some of the ones that I've reread the most and some that maybe I would consider rereading again in the future. Because what do I tell you guys a lot on this channel? Never say never. I never will say never to rereading another series that I do love dearly. So while I tend to lean towards yes, I have far too much things to read before I shuffle off this mortal coil to be worrying about rereads, I do realize there are two sides to every coin, and I can look at that and say, yeah, but you know what? You never know what's going to happen down the line. You might just need some comfort food. So what are some of my favorite series to reread? Well, we're going to talk about today, but I want to let you know up front, if I don't mention a certain series, or maybe if it's one that I haven't read clearly, I'm not going to mention it if I haven't read it, but if I haven't completed said series, I'm not going to talk about reread. So I'm going to go ahead and get out in front of the ℚ𝕤𝕤𝕣𝕉 people that say, well, why didn't you list ℚ𝕤𝕤𝕣𝕉? Because I haven't finished it once yet. But you might be getting news on that rather soon. Stay tuned for that. So let's look at some series now that I have reread, some multiple times, and kind of talk about why I do consider this one of the ones that I love rereading and would do so again. I have to start with my favorite of all time, which is Frank Herbert's Dune. And I do mean the Dune Chronicles, not just book number one. Now, I have read book number one a lot more than I've read the rest of the series, but I've read books 1 through 4 on many, many occasions. When I was in high school and I first discovered this series, and it completely opened my third eye, I couldn't get enough of it. And trying to learn what is he trying to tell me in God Emperor Dune, that was really, really expanding my mind as a 15-year-old. I was really, really coming to terms with who writes like this, So it's one of those series I think there's plenty of things I feel like you learn. Every single time you read it, you'll pick up something new. I've always said Dune hits differently depending where you're at in your life. And where I was at 15 years old, the same age as Paul Atreides when the series starts, it really, really did click for me in ways that I'll never, ever forget. And that's why I've always been able to go back to it, because I said, I feel like as we get older, you get more wise. Hopefully, you get more wise. You learn new things. Your life does change. Those themes and stuff that grabbed me when I was 15 still work today. And I think the answer is a resounding yes. Another one, and this will be one that people probably push back on, because when I named it my favorite fantasy series of all time, I got lots of negative comments, but I'm talking about A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. Yes, I am aware that it is not complete. What I did with this series when I first discovered it is I had never read anything like this. After I read Lord of the Rings a few dozen times, this was like the first step into grown-up fantasy that kind of adjusted to what my life was like at that time. Not that my life was like those characters. I'm just saying that I was an adult now. I didn't need to always hear the saying that the good guys are going to win, the bad guys are going to fail. It was just a little bit more gray than I was used to. So it was really something that just obviously imprinted on me. But I reread that original trilogy over and over again. I would read a Game of Thrones, I would read a Clash of Kings, I would read a Storm of Swords, and then I would just start back over to Game of Thrones, because that was all that was out at the time. Because at the time, I remember us thinking we had to wait so long for Feast for Crows. Hilarious. It's also kind of funny now thinking back to A Dance with Dragons we thought was a long wait. But again, with this, I read that original trilogy so many times because there's so many things to piece together. The theory crafting for that. We had theories for just about everything for years before HBO ever touched it. And I think that was why the R plus L equals J, people were like, my theory was right. And I'm like, oh, you mean that one we've had for decades? Yeah, anyway, it was one of those where it really did mean a lot to me reading this series a lot. Growing up, and I still like to go back to it. I just reread it in 2023, and it still is great, guys. It still is very much incredible and worth your time. And don't let anybody tell you, because the books aren't finished, it's not worth reading. It very much is, and I would read it again, no doubt. I gotta say, The First Law is something that really I've done twice now, and I would be not lying to you, say, guys, I would do it again tomorrow. The First Law is one of those series that just, I wish I could erase my memory and go back and experience it again for the first time. Because what I was doing, and it was right around the time I started this channel, is I said, I want to find something like The First Law. And everything I kept trying was not like the first law. It was broadcast, it was advertised as it was like the first law, and then you'd read it and you'd be like, it's not. It's not what grabbed me about the first law. So what is it that grabbed you about the first law? You have to read it to know. You have to understand that it's just different than everything else out there. And when I was going through all these series of wanting to try to find something like First Law, I just said, why don't I just read First Law again? And that's what I did. And like I said, I would do it again tomorrow because I feel like the First Law is just one of those series that just gets better and better with age for me. It is a fine wine in the grim dark genre here. I think that this is just a series that just hit on every cylinder that I've been waiting for. While I was tired of waiting for George to put out new Song of Ice and Fire books, this kind of filled that void for me, and I just grew to love those characters so much. These awful characters, I just grew to love them to where it's been hard for me to ever find any that can compare, and that's why the First Law has always just been kind of special to me. Now, I said series that have to been finished. Well, I'm going to amend that now. Series that are either finished or I am current on will count here. That's why I'm going to count Red Rising. Now, I did a reread of Red Rising right before Lightbringer came out, but what I really enjoyed about that reread was, I remember book one, I kind of struggled. There was some characters I didn't even really care for in the original trilogy. It wasn't until the sequel books that I really started to click with some of those. Knowing what knowing now what you didn't know then, you go back and you read those early things, you're just like, it's like watching your kids when they were young again. It was like a time machine, going back and seeing these characters I had grown to love later in the series and seeing them in a new light now, rereading it from the beginning and seeing them as, piss and vinegar teenagers just raising hell. It was really fun to go back and experience that way. And I think that's what we want in a reread. We want things that didn't click for us the first time to maybe hit differently because, like I said, you can be at a different place in your life. You can look at the series from a different lens because you're further in it now. There's things that you'll look for now that you didn't look for then. And that's what made the Red Rising reread a lot of fun for me. I am finishing up, as I'm recording this, I've got like 50 pages left in Dark Tower 7, and I will have completed my Dark Tower reread. This is a series for me that I've said, look, I have humongous problems with book 6 and 7. Still a top 5 fantasy series for me for all time, because this is a series, again, knowing now what you didn't know the first time, you can see so much foreshadowing, because it's a lot of us, even myself included, was like, Steve was just throwing it together there at the end because he wanted to be done with it. He was setting the stage for these things, and he might have done a different road if he hadn't had his accident. He probably would have just been finishing Dark Tower now if that hadn't happened. But when you go back and you reread it, you see things, knowing how it ends, you see things that you didn't see the first time. And it's actually quite remarkable to see, wow, he had a lot of these things planned for decades, and a lot of them do pay off. So I think Dark Tower is definitely one of those that will benefit from a reread. And again, you love that concept, and you want to see them all get back together again. And you know what? It's kind of like if you played it in Rewind, and it's just a group of friends getting together and having some fun in a hellscape in another world. It's good times. I do love the Dark Tower, and I'm so happy that I did reread it. Still have a lot of the same problems, but still it has endeared me even more to that series. How about the Big Daddy here, The Lord of the Rings, guys? I have read this trilogy 7 times in my life. Thought it would be more, but I started really actually thinking about it back when, right before I started this channel, I did a reread and started thinking about how many times I'd read it. And I did the math, and I said, okay, I think this is the 7th time that I have reread the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Really, who doesn't want to make that journey again? I know I just kind of commented about how at that point in life where I was like, I didn't always want to see the good guys win, the bad guys fail. There's still plenty of room for things like that. I was just saying that Song of Ice and Fire, that was new to me at the time. So that was like catnip. I couldn't get enough of it. Whereas this, you go back and you remember, this is what made me fall in love with this genre in the first place. And it's a story that might be the greatest journey ever told. It's an incredible story. And it's one of enduring friendship and determination. And I love it. I will never, ever get tired of the story. And it's one of those, it's like, I feel like this and Song of Ice and Fire is going to be battling back and forth for first and second place on my all-time favorite fantasy series. Just kind of depends on what mood I'm in when I record that video every other year when I do it. But yeah, Lord of the Rings, I am not one of those who says, "Oh no, it was great for its time, but it's aged out." That is bunk. Anyone who says that, you can think that. I just can also think I don't have to take your opinion seriously anymore. I think the Lord of the Rings is incredible, and it has endured this long because it is truly special. And yes, I would absolutely reread it again. How about Harry Potter? I hadn't reread this since they were being released. I went and saw the first movie, and I read, I think, the first 4 books throughout the time, and I just binged those in like a weekend. I loved it. Couldn't get enough of it, obviously. Just like everyone else, I was standing in line at midnight to get Deathly Hallows, making lifelong friends in a line with people that I never will see again. That's how it felt, because it was just truly a magical moment. And it was one of those where I just kind of look back with nostalgia and say, I don't think the world will ever stop again for a book release. It just won't. Not like that. Not when we're standing in lines and people there might be some huge book down the line where everybody just has it instantly downloaded to their brains because we got neural implants or something. I just can't ever see a watershed moment like that again. But I also thought maybe it was just nostalgia. I reread Harry Potter with my oldest son a few years back. It just reignited my love for this series. It just said, no, man, warts and all, this series is just so much fun. I love it. And I think it's, like I said, it is the new Chronicles of Narnia, and that it's the series that people are going to pass down to their kids, and they're going to pass down to their kids, and it's going to endure for many, many generations, because it is just truly that special. And it just, no matter what age you are, what you believe, what your religious themes are, whatever your religious beliefs, whatever walk of life you're in, Harry Potter has something for everyone. And I always think it's funny when I find people that are like, oh God, no, I just don't see why people love that so much. And I'm too old now. I've 60-year-old people that have read this series and absolutely fall in love with it. It really is one of those that just kind of transcends all that. And again, rereading it with my kid just really just made me remember how much I do love it. Now that'd be the classics. That'd be the ones that I would say, yes, I have reread those and I would reread them again and I would have no regrets about it. So how about ones that are worthy of a reread? Now these aren't ones I'm saying, yes, I'm going to reread them. I'm just saying, if I was in the game of rereading a bunch of stuff, these would be the ones that I go to. And I'd also say, I can understand why someone would reread that. How about the big one? The Wheel of Time. Obviously, that's going to be the one that everyone says, when are you going to reread Wheel of Time? And I'm like, I'm going to reread Wheel of Time when I have another life, maybe, because it's just who has time to read all this and fit in another 15 chonker books, So the Wheel of Time, what I love about this, it has all the foreshadowing and prophecies and stuff in that series. And it'd be fun since you know what was true, what wasn't, maybe what was misinterpreted, things like that. Seeing it from the beginning would probably be a hell of an experience. I think it would probably be really, really good. Because we're reading A Memory of Light, I'm like, people were reminding me there's lots of stuff that was foreshadowed in books 1 and 2. And I'm like, are you serious? Had no idea. So I think that's one that you go at with new eyes, knowing how the story ends. I think it would be a really, really great experience. So with that one, it's really just a matter of time, guys. I don't have enough time to reread something like that. But I definitely see why people that maybe audiobookers will just kind of re-listen to this over and over again, because there are new things that you can't pick up. And I love a good prophecy. And again, the way that he lays it all out at the beginning, from what I understand, a lot of people say, yes, those prophecies all make sense. I need to read that, I don't care what it's called. It's like a cheat sheet kind of a book where it just kind of went through everything. And it probably explained all of those theories and everything that was kind of laid out early in the series. But yeah, I could see that some stuff was there, and a lot of those prophecies and stuff. Like I said, I don't feel like the prophecies were wrong. Maybe they were just misinterpreted, and that happens to be one of the things I do love in fantasy. The Faithful and the Fallen is absolutely worth a reread. I really, really enjoyed that series. That's probably one of the new series since I started this channel that I loved so much that I've never stopped thinking about. I think I read that back in 2020, and I've just never stopped thinking about it. And look, I don't think John Gwynne has missed yet, but I think The Faithful and the Fallen to me would always just be special because you never forget your first, I think. And Faithful and the Fallen is just, I love that series, and I would love to just visit those friends again. That's definitely one of those where I was like, I miss those characters, and I want to go back and revisit them, especially if you know how John treats a lot of them. Maybe you have to go back to the beginning to see some of them again. But that's a series that I just adored, and I actually said that was one of those where it's like if you're tired of waiting for a Song of Ice and Fire, you're tired of waiting for Winds of Winter, I think that it's not like a Song of Ice and Fire, but I think Song of Ice and Fire fans will like it. I definitely think it's a series you should check out if you haven't, and I would reread that one for sure. I've actually said I think that is one that I will, without a doubt, reread someday because I just ate that series up, and I'd love to visit that world again. The Banished Lands, one of my favorite places. Hey, thankfully I don't have to go there because your life expectancy is not very long there, and they don't have AC, and I gotta have AC. So, but as far as like fiction, that's one of my favorite places to visit. I do love the Banished Lands, and John Gwynne hit a home run with that series, and yeah, I always will think about it, and that's why I think someday I will return. One that I think that I would define as my comfort food is when I was reading The Wheel of Time and I needed some palate cleansers in between it, I always kept falling back on Dresden Files. I read every book that was out in like 7 months, and I loved it. I mean, I don't think there's anybody who really gets that far into Dresden Files and doesn't see why everyone else that loves the Dresden Files loves the Dresden Files. It's an incredible series. It gets better and better. There's not very many series that do that. There are peaks and valleys. I think that, I'm not saying that, hey, this book's better than that one. I just feel like it's a series where the storyline grows so much. It just keeps finding a way to one-up itself, but never, ever jumping the shark. It's just so good. And I love these characters and thinking about the journey that these characters have taken, that they've aged like almost 20 years in this series and seeing where the series started. That's why I think I would love to revisit this. One, because I need a refresher. Yeah, I read them all so fast, and that was what, 2021, 2020? I know the new book is coming out in 2026, and I was like, I would really not mind a refresher on this. Again, I don't think I'll have time to go through 17 books, even as quickly as those go, but it's one of those I can see myself definitely revisiting one day, because I didn't read the short story collections and things like that, so maybe I could fit those in. Maybe I could do like one crazy chronological order reread. That'd be a lot of fun, but yeah, that's, again, sometimes you just need a comfort food. I've got Drizzt as that to keep that place right now, but maybe later down the road, I could see myself visiting Harry and the others. And because I love them and I miss them and I would like to see them again. My favorite universe of all time, guys, is the one that I've spent the most time in would be Star Wars. And the Star Wars expanded universe, or I guess now it's called Legends. To me, I'll always call it canon because you don't wipe out canon and do something worse and expect me to believe it. Anyway, Legends, Star Wars, I think I love the Star Wars EU so much. They're not on the camera, but I've got like 70 plus Star Wars paperbacks over there that I have beat to hell. Like, everybody talking about, like, how do you keep your books in such pristine condition? I'm like, well, if you could see my Star Wars books, it wasn't always that way. I used to lend those out to friends. I used to just throw them in my backpack, and I just beat the hell out of them. That was a great, great time in life. I've kind of compared it to, it was kind of like the MCU before the MCU. Is they got a group of talent together. They said, okay, here's where we want to get to, but we're going to get a bunch of different writers together and tell them, here's you can tell your story, but here's what our ultimate goal is going to. And they kept building and building and building, and then you got the huge climax at the end of New Jedi Order, and it was just amazing. And look, I'm going to be honest with you, the new official canon by Disney, it's crap. It's crap, and I can't stand it. And I think it's just watering down this universe that I have loved my whole life. Again, I've not spent any time in a universe other than that galaxy far, far away. That has been my constant. That's my true north, Star Wars. So to think that how watered down and what a bad place it's in right now, I'm like, you know what? You can always go back to that universe. And you know what? To me, that will always be the official history. That is what happened to Han, Luke, and Leia, not that ridiculous stuff that happened in the sequel trilogy. So again, if you like those things, that's okay. But for me, that's why I wouldn't mind revisiting the Star Wars expanded universe, because to me, it never felt like the movies ended. It felt like, because I had like one of those books coming out every month, every 3 months or so, and it was awesome. From the Thrawn trilogy through the end of New Jedi Order is just awesome, and I love it. Warts and all, yeah, they're not all hits, but there are some great, great, great hits in there. There are some really, really good ones, and some that I've never, ever stopped thinking about. And it grew as we grew. That's what I loved about it. I wasn't a kid anymore. I was getting a little older, and we started seeing the dark side win a lot more. We started seeing some bad guys win. We started seeing some good guys die. It sucked, but it was realistic, and that's what I appreciate about the Star Wars EU, and I'll always, always love it. Lastly, I'll have to say everyone's really, really crazy right now for The Will of the Many by James Islington. I liked it as well. I just got the new book, an arc of the new book. I'm very, very excited to resume with that series. But what put him on the map for me was the Licanius trilogy. And what I've said about the Licanius trilogy is anytime you're messing with a certain plot mechanic, I don't want to say what it is because I feel like that can be kind of spoilerish, but there is a plot device that James uses in that series that makes things get a little bit wonky, a little bit convoluted in some regards. But I mean this in a good way. I mean this in a way that, oh my God, these signs, these answers that we're getting in book 3 were in book 1 the whole time. They're right in front of us. We didn't see it. So again, that's one of those what you know now. Going back and rereading, I bet it would be an incredible ride. knowing the identity of some of these characters, knowing about who was where and when and how and why, it would be an incredible ride, I think. And I would absolutely revisit those if they weren't 800 pages a pop. But I do love that series. And again, everyone that's really, really excited about Hierarchy and they're waiting for book number 2, check out ℙ𝕦𝕤𝕣𝕔 if you haven't yet. Is it as good? Of course not, because he's not as polished of a writer yet. But you could definitely see the flashes of brilliance there. And I think that's an incredible story. Really, really great. I thought the shadow of what was lost was just awesome. Don't listen to the wheelies who put it down just because the blurb on the front said it was like Wheel of Time but better. Now, I felt like they all went into it with their arms crossed and they hated it. And I think if you give it a legitimate shot, you'll really, really like it. Because again, there's some of those plot threads that go through all 3 books. Again, what you find out I think it might be the best epilogue I've ever read in a series. What you find out in those last like 50 pages of book 3 are just awesome, man. And it would make a reread so incredibly rewarding, I think, for a series like that. So that's what I got, guys. Series I have reread, series that I think are worthy of a reread. Some I've already done. Sure, this list will probably grow. There are plenty of series out there where I think it benefits you to have a reread of something. But again, I understand if you don't have the time to reread something. I mean, I want to keep looking for new things to love. So that's why I've kind of toned down a little bit on the rereads. But yeah, these are some that I do treasure and adore and think would be a great experience to revisit some of them. But I would love to know, guys, what are some of your favorite rereads? I know people seem to be a lot more interested in rereads than I am at the moment. So tell me, what are some of your favorite series to reread and why? I would love to hear your answers. So hit me in the comments, guys, and I will talk to you there.